Hey everybody, it's me, John Anthony Chihawk Soltero, but you might know me better as the Anti-Hero. And I just came from the Loft Cinema here in Tucson, Arizona on this lovely fall evening, and I've watched The Joker. Saw it with a couple of my friends, and I'm going to give you some of my thoughts on it in just a second. But I want you guys to know I've had this mask for 6 years, a little over 6 years now, never taken it out of the original packaging. It was created by Mr. Jeremy Rimmel. You can find him on Instagram at Miscreation Toys. Phenomenal works, lots of monsters and ghouls in his line called Autopsy Babies. So if you're into horror and gore and way over the top stuff, Miscreation Toys is a great place to stop. And he does a lot of like vinyls and things like that. So check him out. These, I don't believe he has these anymore, but this mask with the Guy Fawkes imagery painted over as the Joker really has a point to this movie. And I was worried. I guess I shouldn't say I was worried because, I mean, I had nothing to do with the movie or anything like that. But it was a thought process. I thought maybe they were going to go the route of V for Vendetta over a Joker story. And truth be told, it's a little bit of both mixed in. I think they did it very well. But first things first, if you have not seen this movie yet, if you have plans to see this movie, I'm going to do my best not to spoil it. But even more important than that, if you have serious mental illness, if you have suffered trauma, if things like really realistic, brutal violence bother you, this movie is definitely not the movie for you. Walking out of the theater, I noted to my friends, I said, geez, like super trigger warning with this. They agreed. I've never suffered trauma on the level that this character suffered. But with his mental illness that came along with it, I can definitely relate on some levels in that it feels it's not controllable. You don't have any control over that. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit. At age 12, I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, which is a 1% anxiety disorder. I did not know this until about 2016, but it makes a lot of sense. Don't ask me how I didn't know that, having had it since age 12, and I'm 41 now. So only 1% of people diagnosed with OCD or diagnosed with any sort of anxiety disorder have OCD. The way it affected me was threefold, really. One, we just worry about stuff constantly. If I looked at somebody, if I touched something the wrong way, if I touched something and my middle finger was the last thing to come off of whatever I was touching, door handle, signal button to, signal the crosswalk, light switch, I felt like I was flipping off whoever was gonna, push that button next or, turn the door handle or whatever. And I missed more than one bus home, walking all the way back to my school so I could, and I don't know how this fixed anything, retouch the button and rub it so that my middle finger was now not the last thing that touched. One very real thing that happened, and this is crazy. I've never really said this out loud ever. I was in a mall at age, I don't even remember how old I was. I don't even think I had been diagnosed yet. So I was 11 or 12, maybe I was 12, in a mall on the East Coast. Like, this was not in Tucson. I was wandering around the mall by myself. I think my sister and dad and stepmom at the time were like doing all in different directions and stuff. And like a negative thought popped into my head about somebody who just passed by, like just one of those things, like it just a word popped into my head. And I spent, I don't know how long, following this individual around the mall so that I could stop them and apologize for a thought that popped into my head. And I'm glad that I never caught up with them, or if I had caught up with them, I never said anything to them, because one, that person probably would have been really flipped out, might have assaulted me. They were an adult. And definitely would not have understood where I was coming from with that. 7th grade was the year I was diagnosed. I suddenly started failing every single class I had with the exception of art. And my mom asked me what was going on. She saw the progress reports and stuff. And I said, well, I'm taking the tests and I'm filling everything out, but I'm sitting there and I can see people taking the tests at the other tables or next to me. I'm not looking at their papers, but because I could see them in my peripheral vision, I thought I was cheating. I legitimately, honestly thought I was cheating. I would take my test with a pencil and I went back and I erased everything. Everything was erased except my name and the date and whatever period it was. My mom met with all my teachers not to change my grades, not to pass me or anything. She said, he's got to pass on his own, but I want you to know why this is happening. Most of my teachers, I don't remember how many were there. It was at least 3, if not 4. I think, how can you fail phys ed for, thinking you're cheating, whatever. My English teacher started taking notes, asking my mom questions. All the teachers were saying stuff like, yeah, he writes really heavy on the paper. We can see what he's written, but we can't pass him because he's erased it. My mom said, that's fine. We're starting therapy. We're starting medication. We're hoping that this is going to resolve itself. One of my teachers, who I would really like to name, it's been almost 30 years. I don't think it's appropriate to name her, stood up in the middle of that meeting, and forgive me, but this is a quote, "This is bullshit," and walked out. This is a teacher who's responsible for teaching a 12-year-old history, social studies, civics, walked out on the meeting and, and as a 12-year-old, what am I supposed to think? How am I worth it? Because this is what's happening, and a teacher walks out. A lot of other stuff came about it. My hands were red and bleeding nightly from how often I washed them. Not just my hands, but I would wash all the way down to my wrists, so my wrists were really raw, not as bad as my hands and my knuckles. Would coat them in creams and Vaseline at night and put socks on them to just keep them from bleeding during the day. It didn't stop anything. It didn't fix anything. One of the other things that this did was manifested itself in that while walking from school to the bus stop, which was several blocks away, was along 6th Street. And it was busy. It was near the university. The high school was down the road, all this other stuff. And the traffic was always really busy. But I would see pebbles and rocks and things like that on the road. And the unconscious part of my brain, the part that was affected by the OCD, would see those pebbles and rocks and think that a car is going to run over them, tires are going to lock, pop, do something. There's going to be a car accident. Cars are going to pile up onto each other. People are going to be hurt. People are going to die. And I know about it, so I've got to do something about it. So I would run out into the middle of the street while cars are blazing by at 35, 40 miles an hour to pick up pebbles that are this big, sticks. Some of my classmates thought it was kind of funny, so they throw shit into the road. So run out, try to get it. I don't know how I didn't die. I don't know how I was never hit by a vehicle, a bus, anything. I honestly don't. Suffice it to say that I probably negatively affected a lot of people during that time in my life. Not having any friends, having in seventh grade, probably the single worst year of my entire life that kind of categorized everything that happened up until a certain point. I don't know if it started with one person or not. Somebody thought it would be a phenomenal idea to write a love note to me and put it in my locker, which person next to me had a locker and said that they saw somebody put something in my locker. So I thought it was, something I was going to, because people hated me. And it was a love note, and having no friends and having not even the remotest possibilities of a girlfriend or anybody be interested in me, I grasped to that. And the entire school knew about it. It's stuff like that that makes people lose it. It's stuff like that that people think is humorous. I was jumped and tormented numerous times for saying I was Mexican but not being Mexican, because people, your last name isn't Mexican, you don't have brown skin, you don't speak Spanish. Ironically enough, the people who hated me the most for that were blacks and Mexicans at school. And I don't know how it was that I got through junior high and high school. I know in high school how I got through. It was I had Cypress. And I think just how angry I was really, really helped me push through it. I think anger can be a really positive thing at times. I didn't use it in that way at that point in time in my life, but it can save you sometimes. How does that relate to this movie? That was me rambling, and I apologize. But that's very real. That happened to me. All of that stuff happened to me, and I lashed out at people. I lashed out at people who were safe to lash out at. I lashed out at kids who were weaker than me, because I was like somewhere in the middle physically. Like I lashed out at the nerdy kids, the kids who dressed really, really badly. I lashed out at the teachers because the teachers couldn't do anything to me physically. So I was bullied, so I became a bully. It's your basic principle of society. And herein goes, that's how it relates to this movie. This guy suffered trauma as a kid, something he couldn't do anything about. He had mental illness, again, something he couldn't do anything about. These are not things we choose. I just want people to know that. It's not something you choose. You do choose how you deal with it. I got angry. I lashed out. I have since, I feel, done a lot more positive things. I exercise more. I use my art as a therapy. I spend time with my dogs. I try not to isolate myself. But the other thing that the movie made me think about is I carry Agnew around with me a lot. To shows, to conventions, to go see the Joker today. And there are some people who understand, and there are some people in my family and my friends who it doesn't faze them at all. There are other people, mostly in just regular everyday life, who take exception to it. And as he's my sidekick, so as his friend, I feel obligated to protect him because he's smaller, he can't do anything, and this is the characterization I've given him. I've walked through bars with my backpack on, with drunk frat boys punching him. One time, and this is the worst I've ever felt my entire life, and probably the most rage-filled I've ever felt my entire life. I was at a bar. I stepped outside to smoke. Friend came with me. We were drawing and having a couple of drinks. One of the cooks comes out holding Agnew by the by the toe, saying, "He's yours, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "He was in the urinal." So some really tough individuals thought it would be funny to do that, to take, and this might sound strange, take my friend and throw him in a urinal. And as much as I wanted to harm the people who did that, I felt even worse about having dropped my guard for my friend because he's vulnerable. And I don't know if I'm ever going to publish this review or these reveals, but these are things I sit with all the time. I don't know if there is a thing as a hero complex, but there are times when I feel like I really want to be a hero, and there's not much I can do about it, except use my art, lift weights, do yoga, take care of myself, be there for my friends and my family if they need me. Hopefully they're there for me when I need them. I try to be as strong as I can possibly be and brush things off like it doesn't matter all the time. And I'm in a really good place right now. Like, please don't get me wrong with this video. This is not a cry for help. This is me just saying things out loud that have happened over the course of my life. I'm not upset or angry at this moment. This movie just really, really resonated with me and really affected me to the point that it was just effective. I don't know how else to say it. Because the Joker is definitely a character who, if you look at him through that filtered lens, is a very empathetic character, because a majority of the stuff that happened to him up until a point was not his fault, but how he chose to deal with it, with a lack of resources, with the fact that it wasn't even really his choice to isolate himself, but he did. So this is me talking to you, the viewer or whomever. If you are having a hard time, if you are having issues dealing with whatever's going on, there are resources out there. Please seek them out. There are crisis lines all over the place. Please look it up online, have it in your phone, have it on a card. And also, this is another thing that was brought to my attention last month. When I met somebody for the very first time, they introduced themselves, they told me their name, they shook my hand, they told me they had PTSD, which was very off-putting for me at that moment. But then they explained it, and they said, because that's not who I am, that's a condition I have, and there's stigma surrounding mental health. And so if we're just open about it, if we can start a dialogue about it, it starts to break down that stigma. So in the spirit of that, my name is John Anthony Chihawk Soltero. It is nice to meet you. I have obsessive compulsive disorder, probably an undiagnosed generalized anxiety disorder. I have battled depression, tons of anxiety, and substance abuse over the course of my life. But I want you to know that if you want it to get better and you work at it and you find things that work for you, surrounding yourself with a good network of friends and family, it can get better. It will get better. Just please reach out. Just because somebody doesn't say something, it doesn't mean they don't care. A lot of us are dealing with just life. And a lot of us who are experiencing a lot of the same things do not know how to respond. If you're my friend, I want to know how I can help. Talk to somebody. Have a good night.